Hello everybody, welcome to astraeakeva. I'm AO. In today's video I will be doing a tutorial for this week, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you guys how to paint a chocolate chip cookie. So I've been craving chocolate chip cookies, so I just decided to draw it, to paint it. So we're going to start off by just drawing an abstract shape. The reason why I'm not making it a perfect circle or whatever it may be is because, food, especially things like cookies and biscuits, they're not necessarily like straight or anything like that. They're rough, they're homemade food, so that's sort of what I'm going for. And I'm just gonna draw a rough outline. I'm just gonna paint a rough outline. You'll notice in today's tutorial that I'm not necessarily having like a pencil sketch outline, because I want to wing it. I want to see how it turns out. And then I'm going to come in with an eraser and just erase out certain corners, just to give it that more rustic feel to it. So that's what we're gonna do. And I'm also thinking about the perspective, so I'm kind of seeing the side of the cookie, but I don't want to look on top directly, so I'm looking at it from an angle, sort of stepping back, and I can see the top of it and a little side of it as well. So let's just make the size of the eraser smaller. Yeah, so I'm typing chip cookie. I've been wondering if you guys have any like requests on what you want me to paint. Please feel free to share that in the comments, because I really like to do tutorials and stuff like that, so feel free to let me know in the comment section. So yeah, let's just clean up the edges. I don't like it to be too straight, I wanted to have its own character and all of that. Okay, I think this looks good enough for me. So let us increase. I'm going to add the shadows next. I tend to add shadows first on a new layer, and then I also add highlights after. So the highlight layer will be above the shadow layer. You could do it two ways if you're gonna give shadows and highlights. So first you can just pick a darker color on your color bar or color wheel and then paint it over it. Or you can create a new layer and pick the base color and change the blending mode to multiply. And if you want to create highlights, you can pick the blending mode and pick the base color and create the blending mode of overlay. So that's what I do. I tend to first start off by making my brush big for highlights and shadows, and then now I'm going to go in and create these little cracks on the surface of the dough. That's kind of how it bakes, right? It creates these little cracks on top. So that's what I'm gonna do, and I'm using the airbrush, and sometimes I use the watercolor brush, but in small size. So keep these brushes in small size when you're doing these little details. And I'm not necessarily trying to figure out, I'm making it like perfect. I'm literally just winging it basically. I want it to look unique and different, so that's what I'm doing with these little cracks. And I'm changing the color of the brush accordingly, and also the size of the brush accordingly, so the cracks don't look so uniform. Some of them look deep, some of them look darker, some of them look thinner, shallow. So that's kind of what I'm going for. And when you are painting, pick a color that's a little bit darker than the area you're painting. So in the highlight area, pick a darker color than the highlight area. In the shadow area, pick a color that's a little bit darker color. And so that's kind of what we're gonna do. And you can also color pick around the cookie itself, just so that the color is more uniform. and you can take your time with this. I was watching Netflix while I was doing this, so I tend to do these studies and tutorials when I'm relaxed. I don't want to freak out or anything like that. I'm enjoying myself while I'm doing this. A well-baked cookie. Do any of you guys like baking? I like baking. I bake a lot. I cook a lot. Actually, I cook majority of the time, maybe 5 times a week. And then the rest of the week, other people cook. So I hardly eat takeout. I tend to bake a lot, cook a lot from scratch. It was probably how I was raised, so that's why I like it. Okay, so now that we've created some cracks, let's just deepen them even more. And you can keep going until you feel comfortable. I don't think you can kind of overdo it, because especially food, when you bake it, it's unpredictable. They don't all come out uniform or the same. So that's why I just want to wing it. And I'm kind of also focusing on the side of the cookie, because we tend to forget that it's a 3D object, right? It's not only a flat surface where you can see the tops, you can see the side as well. And I'm really focused on the light source, which is coming in on the left, and I'm focused on the dark side where it's more the shadow falls. So that's kind of what I'm doing. So now we're gonna go back to our square watercolor brush, and I'm going to paint the base color of the chocolate chips. You can make the chocolate chips sizes any size you want. I just wanted to give it a characteristic where there's a little bit of a extended end to the chips. That's kind of what makes it look like a chocolate chip. And so I'm just going to place them in randomly on random places, random spots. Yeah, you can look for references online how chocolate chips look like, but I'm also going to say that you have to think about this. You baked this chocolate chip cookie, so the chocolate has melted a little bit, so it's not going to look like a chocolate chip that hasn't been baked. So you have to think about that as well. So it's seeping into the dough of the cookie. And also you notice that as I'm drawing the chocolate chips, I'm also drawing them on the sides, not only on the top, and I'm trying to make the shape as 3-dimensional as I possibly can. So let's continue to fill it in. And you will notice another thing is that where it's darker, the chocolate chips are also darker. Where the light is hitting the chocolate chips, you'll notice that it's a bit lighter in color. You can either paint the entire chocolate chips, all of them the same color, and then what you can do is create a new layer on top of the chocolate chip layer and create a gradient over those, so that the gradients can have like a lighter shade on one side and a darker shade on the other. But what I like about what I did is that not all of the chocolate chips on the left are a light color, and not all of them on the right are a dark color. They kind of intermingle and all of that. And I also want to draw it as close to the dough as possible, so it looks like it's really seeping into the dough. I attempted to create something like a melting chocolate, but I gave up at the end. I just thought, let me not waste my time. I'll probably make another video where I will paint like chocolate syrup or something. Yeah, let's just do that later. So, and make sure to also draw the chocolate chips above the layer, so you can see some of the chocolate chips are sort of sticking out on top, just to make it look appealing as well, and not too 2D. We're looking for 3D here. Okay, so after we've created the sort of 3D shapes of the chocolate chips, I'm gonna add borders around them. So my computer didn't really capture that, but what you do is you click on select, then you click on opacity. So select, create selection from layer opacity, and then after that you will notice that it selected the chocolate chips themselves, and then you click on select again, and then you click on border. If you want to click border on your keyboard, you can just press Ctrl B, and it created this little faint border around the chocolate chips. And then I took a lighter color, and I'm going to very close to white, and I'm going to create the little reflections of the chocolate chips. I'm using a square watercolor brush. You will notice that I'm sort of obsessed with this brush. I can't seem to find another brush just like it, so I use it a lot. Yes, I'm pretty much obsessed with the watercolor brush. Okay. And when it comes to adding the highlights for the artwork, for the chocolate chips that are on the dark side of the cookie, I tend to pick a color that's a little bit more darker, so that it looks like there are highlights, but they're not as bright as where the light is directly hitting the object. As for the chocolate chips on the sides, I picked a color, but it wasn't too bright. Actually, you don't have to add highlights to the chocolate chips that are on the opposite side of the light source. As you'll notice, the cookie is very messy, but that's kind of the point. It's not supposed to be perfect, right? Okay. If you need to add some shadows, feel free to do that. So I was really thinking about creating more highlights. So I'm gonna add more highlights to the cookie. And like I said, when I add highlights and shadows, I tend to I tend to make the brush sizes pretty big and just adjust the colors accordingly if it's pretty too dark or something like that. And I like how the colors are coming through, especially on the darker side when you create when you paint over the with a blending mode of overlay and also dodge. I really like dodge as well as overlay. So I started with a bigger brush, and then I'm moving towards a more smaller brush when it comes to details. And when it comes to very bright, I want to have my brush to be kind of big. So unless you're having like a reflection on water, your highlights tend to be quite smaller, your strokes. So during this time, I was thinking about making the surface of the brush pretty rough. And so I was going through my MEDIBANG and trying to figure out which brushes actually work. I tried the noise brush, which you can find in the MEDIBANG resources. I use MEDIBANG Paint Premium. It's only like $25 a year. So that just means I can use a majority of the brushes for free. I don't need to pay for them. So I was looking for a brush, basically. because I'm trying to make the surface of the brush, the cookie, look as though it has little holes in it. For example, when you bake, the surface sort of cracks, right? So like the cracks that we drew. But I didn't want to spend a lot of time drawing each individual little crack that I could. So that's kind of what I do when I'm using MEDIBANG, or when I was using Photoshop too. I was looking for brushes that you can use for other things. Like for example, the grass brush that you can use to draw grass and all of that. I tend to draw not necessarily grass with it, but fur. The grass brush is great for drawing fur. So I'm using oil pastel brush, and the oil pastel brush, which I'm drawing on the surface, is my favorite brush for drawing skin. It's one of my most used brushes, as you'll notice, that I wrote that the folder of the brushes is called most used. It's my most used brush. I draw skin, and you'll notice that the surface of the cookie doesn't look so smooth. It sort of looks rough. So that's what I'm trying to do. And as I always paint, I tend to organize my layers. So that's kind of what I'm doing. Don't worry. After I've drawn on the cookie with the oil pastel, I'm just going to change the color of the background, because I like to draw my characters or anything that I draw. I like to draw it as though they were like glowing. So glowy effects that I tend to draw all the time are perfect when the background is a bit dark. Yeah, so sorry about my voice. I tend to make the background darker than I would imagine. And I tend to look at the color, overall color of the object that I'm drawing. So the cookie is sort of yellowish, orange, brown. So the background is gonna have a base of blue. I do this with my characters as well. If the hair color, mostly it's affected by either the hair color or the clothing that they wear. I would pick a complementary color to that to paint the background. Then now what I did was I created a duplicate of the cookie. I merged all the layers in that duplicate and moved it underneath my file, and then picked a color and created a shadow for it. You can either use blurring to create a shadow, or you can use the smudge tool. It all depends on what you're trying to do or what type of look you want to have. So I decided to go with a little bit of blurring. I blended a little bit, as well as smudging it as well. I use the smudge tool for other things too, like hair. So, and make sure that you switch off the pixel lock or the protect alpha to smudge it. Just gonna make my brush big. It's lagging because my brush size is big. MEDIBANG does that too, especially with the smudge tool. Photoshop also does that too on my laptop when I'm trying to smudge something. I don't know why. And you can use different brushes as well. You can use the airbrush. It's also good for drawing the shadows, so that the shadows look very airy, I should say. They don't look too rough. So I'm just blurring it. Yeah, I picked the wrong brush. I was supposed to pick the airbrush. And then I noticed it, right? So with the airbrush, I'm going to just draw more shadow And if you want the shadow to look more horizontal, draw horizontal. And if you want to move the color around, you can use the transparency tool on top. That's what I'm doing. I'm using both the colors as well as the transparency tool. And make sure to always optimize the layers. By optimizing layers, it basically just means that you name the layers, you arrange them in a way that you can understand. Because I'm trying to keep it in the back of my mind. In the future, I might share my files with people on Patreon. I would like to keep my layers separate, and so that's why I keep my layers very separately. Right now, I'm going to add some glowy effects. I'm using Dodge blending mode, and what I did was I created a new layer on top of the cookie and made that layer Dodge, and then I picked a random color that I like. You'll notice that I have a little bit of an obsession with purple. You also notice some of my characters always wear purple or blue or something like that. So kind of like cold colors. I like to dress my characters in cold colors, but the characters themselves have warm tones, like their skin colors have warm tones. So that's what I do. And lastly, we are at the end. Yay, we made it. I'm going to look for a brush to create some sort of effects around it. There are so many brushes out there, and you can create your own brushes on MEDIBANG very easily, but I tend to put sparkles or dusts or something like that, so I have effects and all of that around the objects that I paint, just to give it my little signature. That's what I enjoy painting. And that is all for this video after you enjoyed the little sparkles. But thank you so much for watching my tutorial for today. This week I'm thinking of doing more tutorials. I'll just see how I feel. But thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all enjoyed it. If this is the type of content that you like, please feel free to subscribe, like, share, and comment. That helps more people come to my channel and more people see the content that I create. And that